you know, mention some things.
Islam.
So it's like appointing the minister of government.
Want to thank everybody for coming. We ain't seen y'all in a long while. It seems like it's been like a whole year. You know what I'm saying? Isn't that how it seems? But Islam to the brothers and sisters. This is gonna be the last session for the month of December, and then we'll start in January. Not a new year, but we're gonna start in January. That's not our new year.
Yeah.
But I want to give congratulations to Brother Tarik and Delshawn, and Zarian. I was wondering where they've been. I was like, man,
building.
where they at? You know, the brother, he was coming down to the gym, boxing and everything, working out. But he been doing a different type of workout. My brother ain't been here. But it's all good, man. That brother, that baby, man, is alert. He a warrior. You're a warrior, brother. Yeah. Right.
You know, you checking out everything too.
Checking out everything, man. But you know, we running a little late, so we won't get this thing started. But earlier I was listening to the news, and I heard that a teacher, y'all probably heard, a teacher got fired for telling the children there's no such thing as Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. And she got fired. And I'm like, man, this whole society is ran and based on falsehood, man.
It is.
Straight up. In every way.
Yes.
Every way. Through government, through their religion. You know what I mean? Not to stay off the subject, but I was saying, anybody ever heard of what's her name? Lilith. Anybody ever heard of her? Lilith? You're Lilith? Man. She was in Christianity, she was Adam's first wife.
That Lilith.
Yeah. and what they do is they hide the story because this Lilith was supposed to be made just like Adam. She wasn't made from no rib.
Yeah.
She was made from the ground and even and equal and everything. And so everything that Adam tried to tell her, she felt like, look, man, we make the same way.
Yeah, we equals.
You know, we equals. So they made her into a demon. Right? Made her into a demon. And then later on in the Bible, in the story, they get into talking about then they made Eve from the rib of a man. And that was only to degrade the woman. That was only to degrade the woman and make her seem like she's less. So you come from me. You come from my rib, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. So you do what I say. And she's submissive. But that's not the way how women were. And we come from a matriarchal system. You know, but I just thought that was interesting, man. And you're gonna blow their whole cover with that stuff, man. And the whole thing is mythology anyway. Everything in the book is mythology. And it was all myth. Everything is your myth. But what they do is they put it and act like it's real people, man. You know, we moving into the time of Aquarius, and that age of Pisces, man, the Piscean age. Look, it's gone. These young people, man, they don't want to hear that stuff. It's time to go forward in all type of ways, man. So it's some crazy stuff going on out here today. But we, just like I was talking with Taj, coming over here, sometimes we get tired of this stuff. Me too. All the time. But understand, it's our lesson. That's why we're here. It's our lesson to learn, man. And so we just got to stay steadfast and keep it going, man. Stick together and let's roll through this thing. All right? Hey, look, give it up for Taj Tarik Bey.
All right. basic subject matter, I left this on the board because we were doing this the last time. And so if you all want to take a picture of that before I erase it and ask a few things about it before we take it off, because we want to get into a little bit of the culture, because it's necessary, because it's still involved in what we're doing. Clear? Clear. But anyway, while you're looking at this, I'm going to read this off, and then I'll go up to the front of the board. Now, America, American. And so we're addressing severe birthright contortions and a conjoined identity crisis. This is a continuation of work that we've been doing this month, even in other areas, because it has to be addressed because of the politics that's going on at North America and in the world. This is an important and opportune time, because this was written in 92, so it's 92 plus ongoing, to address one of the most vile and severe contortions and corruptions of true pedigree, of birthright theft, of true geography, of true identity, of true ecology, of basic etymology, and of true and undistorted history. The complexity of these issues are definitely expansive. Therefore, we will address these issues in a generalized and principled fashion. All right? Now, the principles of these arguments logically are broad. This is why we're generalizing, so you can look at it, the hypothesis, that it applies across the board. Because most of the stuff is not really complex. It's just common threads that people don't put together. And because it's affecting all parts of life, they think it's different principles, when principles are still one and the same in general. Now, an interesting point of fact to present for examination is that of the commonly underestimated and destructive nature of European colonialism and its effect upon the Aboriginal and indigenous natural peoples of the world. And while the subject of colonialization of America is broad and multifarious, we will address some of the current negating effects containing or contaminating the true American nations. First, let us identify the parties noted in this treatise. The primary and de jure party in this treatise is the Aboriginal dark copper complexion natural peoples of the land, America, and these are the Americans. America is the continent that extends from the northern hemisphere of the planet Earth, Gaia, into the southern hemisphere of the Earth. The secondary party noted in this treatise is the Germanic tribes of Albion. And these Ibrida hybrid tribes are also known as Occidentals. Now, in the connotative linguistics, the people refer to the Occidentals as Europeans. Are we clear? Although we are Europeans too, if you get the point. Because that's actually an Asiatic queen who took on the responsibility for the hybrids when they were taken to the land of Angles. And so the name is taken on by them, but actually they're Albion, or hybrids. And so this is why the Europeans are never referred to as indigenous anywhere on the planet, because they're not indigenous, they're hybrid. And because many people don't know that, a lot of the complex problems that we have in our interchanges confuses people. Now, understand the issue of human society on the planet is not a rejection, it's a placement of order because of the agenda of Rome declaring themselves God and stealing all the lands and the properties of the people. Are we clear? That's what you're countering. Are we clear? In the modern days, and when we say modern days, we measure time and chronology a little different than you for the most part have been trained to do. All right, so what is designated as ancient generally in the order of the Germanic tribes is really modern to us. However, most of us are trained under the European education systems, and so our presented concepts of ancient is accepted but not true. So when you're looking at ancient Hikkupta as an example, they'll use ancient Hikkupta as a landmark, and it's like ancient Egypt, but that's really not ancient to us. We accept that that's the way things are written, but that's modern to us. As a matter of fact, it's really contemporary to us. You know, but in context, we'll present that way, all right? Now, one of the interesting things, yesterday I had a conversation with, it was actually a couple brothers and a young brother who came into the restaurant. I was having coffee yesterday morning. And they were talking about Donald Trump, which is a subject matter that comes up today. And half of them are mad at him for nothing. And you know, they don't know the man, and they don't really know the politics, but they're following the party line. Whatever the narrative is, they usually follow. However, he's not friend or enemy in the sense that they take it, if you get the point. And amongst all of the politicians operating at North America under United States jurisdiction, he is the best that they have to offer, with all of the rest of them put together in a package. In fact, and that's not defending him, that's just simply the fact. Now, people who don't know the politics, they mad at him, because the party line is to be mad at him. You know, he's the president, so all presidents are the pinata for the few years they're in, when actually they're just voices for a body of men that's behind them oligarchs that actually make the policy. It's no different than you going to Mickey D's and saying, man, these fries, man. You know, you mad at the manager, everybody wants to string him up and everything. No, he's just an employee. He's following a policy. The headquarters or something. That's what it is. Now, point that I'm making is, a couple of brothers, like in the Shakamoxon area where I domicile in Philadelphia, particularly in the West, you know, West Philly, we have heavy Islamic influence, right? We have all kind of Muslims and Muslims there, right? Asiatics. And one thing you'll notice with them, just like among the Christians, they're divided. They deal with each other, but they still deal as sectoralism. And the interesting thing that I discovered in the conversation yesterday is that many of them have the same biases that they're accusing other people of having. And not really knowing the real history, or thinking that the stuff that's going on has nothing to do with them. It absolutely does. You know, these things must be known and comprehended to fix a lot of things. Keep this in mind, all modern politics, not just in or at America, North, Central, South, and the islands, but around the planet Earth, is based on absolutely the fall of the Moors at the hands of the Germanic tribes. Are we clear? Clear. They'll write it in history as the battles between the Muslims and the Christians. That's how it's written in history. Now, and that's not exactly true the way it really is, if you understand, but that's how you'll get it in history. But what you'll notice is that many of our people, because they've been trained, understand this, they've been trained to identify themselves with their religious beliefs, not with their pedigree. Are we clear? Clear. And so most of their minds are corrupted when dealing with real problems in the world. They don't see it that way, but it's true. Are we clear? Clear. Much of that needs to be fixed without people being so sensitive. And so you'll find it difficult to get people to start solving the human problems because they're usually blocked by their belief systems, not knowing that most of them are under mind control. Are we clear? And without condemning and this is just simply the truth. The masses, for the most part, whether they're dealing with Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, etc., basically are taught from a dogmatic format. Are we clear? Not from a Gnostic format. So let's make this clear. And I'm presenting this because this has to be, you have to comprehend this in order to deal with these Europeans who are dealing with you, against you. Failure to recognize what I'm saying is a weakness and is dangerous for you. Are we clear? Just because they don't discuss these things, it's not what's going on. Are we clear? Because they're waging war on you, whether you're passive or not. They're waging war on you, whether you claim to be religious or not. Because they already know that the masses generally don't get religion. Are we clear? And that's not condemning people who claim to be religious. Are we clear? They just don't know they're being played. Are we clear? And it's difficult, and I understand it. It's difficult. But even if they really knew the books that they had, they would liberate themselves too. But most people go by the party line, not by real research. Are we clear? Now, as an example, fact. All of the persons who were ministers plenipotentiary under protection of Sidi Muhammad, Sultan of Morocco, with the adoption of the world's longest running treaty operating on the planet, called the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, between the Moors and Great Britain, i.e. the European tribes, etc. All of those persons, you know, as Madison, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, all had Korans. Are we clear? Although some of them would be classified as Christians. Are we clear? Many of your congressmen, Europeans and Asiatics, in rituals will take their oaths and then go take it on the Quran. Are we clear? It's not published big here because we're under conquest. We're under colonial operations. Are we clear? Because they don't want the people to know that America is Morocco. That's among the secret societies is what you call one of the great Masonic secrets. That's why all your secret societies wear the Moorish fez. So are we clear? Are we clear? That's the real reason. Because they're at Morocco. You've been conquered. Under the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition never ended. Are we clear? It continued. Now, one of the difficult things that you have with liberating our people is because they have also been caught up into what you call sectoral operations of schismata. Now, sectoral operations of schismata is though most of our background is Islam. Do you understand? Most of these Asiatics of Asiatic African descent are Muslims. They don't know their history. Are we clear? Many of them became what you call conversos. They were converted to Constantine order under the guise or under the tag of Christianity. Are we clear? They'll claim Christians, but they're really Constantinians. Are we clear? Are we clear? Now, we're talking just facts. And what you discover is that people, even people that do research, you discover that many of them are just simply not aware of that. Or many who are aware will deny it because they don't want to recognize their own hypocrisy. Or they want to get along with their family members because as soon as people start getting into the dogma systems that they call religion, you see a bunch of hatred come out, a bunch of division, hostility. It has nothing to do with love, divinity, and everything. It has to do with dividing people. Do you understand? While they're always talking about gods and devils every 5 minutes. And it's the truth. You know, it's a sensitive subject, but if you're going to solve problems, you got to be honest. And because most people are hypocrites by design, they take offense rather than look at facts. They think you're attacking them, when actually these are the facts. And if you're going to solve problems, you got to be true to yourself. And while we are pretty much full of it, without toilet paper, nature doesn't recognize it. And so the problems, because of the falsehoods that we've been living our problems continue in generations. And so we have a lot of political suffering, economic suffering, social suffering, while lying to our children and ourselves, talking about how saved we are. And of course, that's a perfect example of hypocrisy. Are we clear?
Clear.
However, most people won't be willing to look at themselves and start cleaning up. So let's get to the facts. Much of the Gnostic wisdom that's shared or sold by degrees in secret societies is really culturally Islam. Are we clear?
Clear.
It is presented to the people as either devil worship or something negative to keep you from looking at it. Almost anybody that's in a position of power, from the praetor you refer to as president, your congresspeople, persons in business, and persons who call themselves elite, though that's a misnomer, know that Islam is a science of life and a knowledge of the workings of life. Not a belief in it, a knowledge of it, distinguished from a belief about it. When you deal with a belief about it, that's not wrong, that's dogmatic. Are we clear? In other words, I believe this is a board, right? Distinguished from I know it's a board. Okay. You understand? If this electricity went out or something like that, I would go down there and with a tester and check the box and see if, the breakers are on or whatever, and then check the outlets to see if they're 110, 220, whatever, with knowledge. And I fix it based on knowledge. I would not approach it. It's not that I don't believe in electricity or not, but there's a difference between knowledge and believing anything. Prior to European conquest, if you went to a masjid, masjids were actually universities. Now they're mostly salat. You make salat now. But before European colonialism, you learned all the natures of life, all the sciences, all the mathematics, the disciplines, the calculus, geometry, herbology, anatomy, cosmology, astrology. That's Islam science. It is the knowledge of all the disciplines that operate on the planet Earth and on some of the other planets. That's Islam science. Now, knowing about it or symbolically respecting it is believing. Are we clear?
Clear.
Clear.
Which is not a negative, but meaning that a believer can't function. A believer just goes through rituals. A knower is a scientist. A knower fixes things. The difficult thing to do with a lot of the Asiatics is to get them back to the honor of their mothers and fathers who were scientists, not believers, not that belief is rejected. It's for children. But what you find over these last centuries, most adults are still on the child level in what you call belief systems and think that is spirituality. That's not spirituality. That's not a condemnation of them. It's what they were controlled and taught by. As an example, a lot of things that we talk about the social problems of humanity, if you had those conversations in a private venue where you had PhDs, rabbis, Brahmic priests, master masons, imams, bishops, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, all of them have Gnostic wisdom, and there wouldn't be any dispute whatsoever. There might be, slight contentions on the way you present, but the knowledge is one. Then they come out into the world and they got these different clubs called these different religions, and they act like they don't know what the other one's talking about. It's for mind control. The masses don't know that they're slaves, and the priesthood did it. It ain't no mystery devil did it, the priesthood. And that all your politicians are priests. It's got a different name. And there's no separation of church and state. They're one club. And you ain't part of it. You've been the product. Do you understand? So when people be going to these houses that they call, houses of God, Jesus, Prophet Muhammad, etc., it's controlled by the state. But they act like it's separate in order for you to be satisfied so you don't rebel. Are we clear?
Clear.
Meanwhile, they all rape you, just at different degrees. And one of the sensitive things that you find is that we're more sensitive because among the Constantinians, they've been more terse or more cruel or more corrupt. And so they look at the deep corruption in Constantinian order under the guise of Christianity and then think that we have not been corrupt in Islam and Judaism too, when we've been corrupt across the board. Are we clear?
Clear.
It's just that some of them are more corrupt than others. And so we look at them a lot because of the stuff they've been doing. However, we haven't been innocent. Are we clear? And we need to take responsibility and start fixing things. For real. Meaning, let's start doing good, let's start doing right because it's correct to do, not because we're looking for some reward. Are we clear? However, we need to know some of the things that are going on. Now, I left this up here. Ali brought the board back up, and I'm going to go into the contortions of the birthright theft, etc., because we're going to talk about the political operations now and decolonization, essentially, because that's what you're dealing with. And even this is still dealing with decolonization, right? So, if you're in, say, the Alhambra or in a masjid a couple hundred years ago, this would just simply be a part of your cultural studies. Part in other stuff too. Today, they would look at this having nothing to do with Islam. Because they think Islam is just making salat. And painting your beard orange. No, serious. That's how we are. And that's not a knock. We have fallen, and we don't recognize we've fallen. Are we clear? Yeah. Meanwhile, Rome is ruling you in your own land. And what has happened, and if you study our people really carefully, what they've actually been doing, they've been using their concepts of religion to hide from responsibility. Because they really don't feel that they have any power. And since Rome has dominated and conquered them, rather than challenge their different versions of God to stop this colonial operations, you notice that they never pray for that, they pray for every daggone thing else. Because the European is their God. So nobody's supposed to say that. And still instead of calling him their great white father, they'll just call him white man, which means sovereign. So they can maintain some kind of sense of dignity. They don't fear God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, Jesus. They fear that European. But because of their egos and their arrogance and their hypocrisy, no one is supposed to say what I just said, but that's absolutely true. And until we can get them to face that first false premise that they're operating on, particularly at the Americas, they're not going to solve their economic and political problems. And then Rome can continue what they call drawing the line. And drawing the line is contortion. Drawing the line is claiming, because one of the things that they've always done was, and we were talking about this on the way up, is identity theft. And so the Europeans, one of the things that they would do as they conquered an area, they would kill the culture, change the names of people and lands, and then they claim the identity of the people to claim the land. This is why the Europeans refer to themselves as Americans when they're not. Problem is that the Americans don't call themselves Americans. They've accepted the European Dutch masters' code system of nom de guerre and agreed to be black, Negro, and colored, and Indian, all of which were nom de guerre and all made up. None of that is real. Are we clear? Yeah. And because they don't know the history, they think that these words or Nam de Gear are identities of Asiatic Africans. Not knowing that when they accept them, that they've actually stepped off the platform of heritability. So these things must be exposed in order for people to have a concept, not only from a moral and ethical position, but actually from a position of standing in law, so that we can fix the economic problems. Are we clear? You know, because a beggar people cannot develop the highest spirituality in themselves. It's impossible. Now, point. The only reason I left this here, because this is the basis, because you'll see as people are trying to fix problems, you'll see them arguing about money when most of them don't know what money is, right? Now, when you know the truth of culture on the planet Earth, the Earth culture is based in cosmology. When you see the crescent and the star, this is called Cosmo. All right, so you show this to most people and say, oh, that's Islam. Yes, but no, not the way you think it is. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's nature. Are we clear? That symbolizes culture on the planet. This symbolizes the crescent moon and its 8 phases. And that symbolizes Venus, but it also symbolizes man. This symbolizes also the uterus, that also symbolizes the egg. It has multiple meanings, are we clear? Now, in cosmology, the alchemical metals of the major planets that affect life on this planet, Earth, are used as what you would call your trade monetary system. Are we clear? Now, they will teach people that money, the word money comes from the Roman goddess Moneta, which is a lie. No, it's dealing with Luna or the moon. Are we clear? For the moon governs the womb on a cycle of 13. It governs the waters, it governs the rhythm of the blood, etc. And so you deal with the natural ecology of life. Are we clear? Movements of the fish in the waters, etc. The nuances of the seasons, which is why all your major days of the sun's transits in the universe or in this solar system, the ecliptics of the sun, all your major days of nova points of high energy that we would call days of the sun are called Halig. Halig is Sanskrit, which means the sun. And from Halig is where you get the term holy. So when you hear the term holy, you're really getting from Halig, which means the sun. Are we clear? So if you from a scholar position, somebody say Holy Bible, that means sun book. Holy Quran means sun reader. And yet most people don't know how to read the sun. Because they don't know these are cosmology books also. Are we clear? Now, and so this is culturally, the foundation of these cosmological principles were taught before European colonial operations. Are we clear? And so even though a lot of the general culture of Islam has been maintained, the real science of Islam has been pretty much suppressed. And therefore, the direct descendants of them ancient Muslims who ruled the world don't know how to govern anymore. They know how to believe, but they can't govern anything. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And they're pretty much operating on emotion and frustration, just like a lot of people under Constantine order calling themselves Christians, divided all against each other, arguing all the damn time, and not fixing anything, but they're claiming to know the books. Are we clear? Meanwhile, the European keeps that confusion going on, and he rules all of them and rapes them. That's exactly what's been going on. So until the people themselves start willingly studying and removing emotions, they will be caught in that false matrix. Because the coming out of it is determined on you, really not from someone else. Are we clear? As a reminder to you, in dealing with these matters, as you already know, around in the late 50s, after the Dutchman Eisenhower came out of office, And just before John Kennedy was placed as the CEO for the corporation, remember that Dwight D. Eisenhower reminded everyone to beware of the congressional military industrial complex. And usually when they talk about that statement, they'll cut off that first word, congressional. That's so that you forget about the Act of Congress of 1871, where the Congress for the United States set up their secret oligarchy. They had perfected their operations. And as a reminder, the Sino Dia operations of 1861, March the 27th, and then after successive assassination of Abraham Lincoln, who was the last lawful president. Are we clear? So these fundamentals must be known by you so that you can comprehend the politics. Are we clear? Persons in the priesthood know this, persons in masonry know this, persons in all your secret societies know this, but the general masses aren't told this. Are we clear? Though the people who are telling you about gods and devils get their degrees by learning this knowledge. Are we clear? However, they don't talk it. They keep you praying while you get preyed upon. This, unfortunately, it's true. It's true. Logically, that presents us with a difficulty of trying to communicating with people who are under mind control because they think you're attacking their gods when you're actually trying to liberate them. Are we clear? Which is why the Europeans have been so sure that they got this thing covered. And it's also why he's been ruling for so long. It's because the people keep thinking that what they've been learning they got from the prophets, not knowing that Rome has been controlling them. Are we clear? Clear. Finalized in 1960, Special Committee of 24, write some of these things down. I'm not going to get into them deeply, but these are points of reference for you. Special Committee of 24 is comprised of roughly 24 different nation states on the planet Earth that are working towards and agreeing upon addressing the issue of colonization. Are we clear? And essentially dealing with and setting up methods for decolonization. Are we clear? Great Britain, of which the United States Corporation Company is a subdivisional colony and not a country. So you have the people, the true Americans, who have been trained to think that the British colony trading company registered in Austria, styled as the United States Trading Company, they think it is a country here in Central North America because they've been trained from childhood that it is, which of course it is not. Are we clear? So this is one of the mental blocks that we have in front of us to dissemble by necessity to begin to liberate these people. The nations of the earth were supposed to be doing this, and this is since 1960, and most of you in this room weren't even here then. You get the point? And so the deal of it is, it's incumbent upon you to decolonize. Are we clear? And it's not that the Europeans necessarily going anywhere physically, is that what you're dealing with is political and economic jurisdictions. Are we clear? And so the European is wealthy here because they've been living off your birthright. And our people think that they have money. No, they don't have money. They've created under their unum sanctum policy of inquisition against the Moors, or the policy of unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery, and allege that you owe them because the Pope is God. Are we clear? And therefore, because you're breathing out carbon, therefore they have a right to have a carbon tax on you. That's what the carbon tax is really all about. You're being charged for living. And the tax is really a tithe system. And what the preacher don't get, the corporate state gets. Tithe means 10% Roman tax. Are we clear? Now, in order for them to deceive, to exercise what is called the sovereign right or power of taxation, you're dealing with what you call sovereign jurisdiction. This is why the Europeans refer to themselves as Americans, hoping that you don't challenge them on it. Are we clear? And then by you who are the American, claiming, agreeing to be Negro, black, or colored, or Indian, disconnected yourself from the land. And then transacting business in his name that may put you under his jurisdiction legally. Are we clear? That's how non-de-guerre works. Are we clear? So persons of color are by legal definition wards of the state. And by virtue of that status, you have no right of inheritance. So by default, generation after generations, the Europeans, through their corporate state, gain wealth by virtually controlling the land, the resources, and your labor. That's how it's done. Are we clear? You must reverse that. But you need to know what you're dealing with. You know, if you don't know that that's your problem, logically you don't address it. And so most of our people think if they pray harder, that that's what's going to solve it, because that's what they were told. It's not really what it is. Are we clear? The reality is that they're stealing your birthright. And they must contort history, law, linguistics, geography, etc. to do it. Are we clear?
Clear.
That's why we're on the subject matter. Are we clear? Now, the money, although we have different precious metals and subdivisional precious metals, these are the major alchemical metals that we use for money, and that is silver, copper, and gold. And so what you're dealing with, the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's the culture on the planet. Are we clear? Cosmology. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, the moon, because it deals with the water, the blood flow, the rhythm of the blood, etc. The governing of the womb. This is where you get the ankh. Did you see like this? That's what that is really is. But that's really a geometric representation of the womb, the fallopian tubes, and the birth canal. All Asiatic cultures, matriarchy, not patriarchy. So you got to know that too, to know the culture. So if you go into ancient Asiatic African history and don't know their matriarchies, you go in there with that patriarchal mentality that you got from the popes of Rome, and you contaminate Islam then. And this is part of what's problem with us too in Islam, that we approach it incorrectly. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Clear.
And so we actually undermine ourselves, the way we look at things. Are we clear? All right. And then they can use the Christian black codes to keep putting women and men clashing with each other rather than balance and harmonizing, which is a war operation. Are we clear?
Clear.
It's not an attitude, it's a war operation and not accidental. Are we clear? Now, they have secret societies for themselves so they don't start believing what they've been teaching you. I mean, they're trained to teach you belief systems, but secretly they themselves don't accept that. Are we clear? That's why all of your Gnostics are Masons. What they'll say Masons, that covers a broad base. Mason means mother, son. That's the nature of life. Are we clear? Ma and son. Or Set and Horus. Jesus and Mary means the same thing. Isis and Horus all means the mother. That symbol, you see the mother with the son on her lap. That's Masonry. Mother and son. That's all on this planet. Are we clear? And everything else we made up. Are we clear? And got lost in it. You get the point? Now those who rule learn these ancient principles, or what you call the Gnostic wisdom. They learn what you call the Hermetic Law. The Hermetic Law. So Hermes Trismegistus that's talked about in Masonry is really thought, or what you call Tahuti, which becomes Elohim, Allah, and all the other names that we present. Are we clear? And Allah is a feminine name. It really means woman. And so on another level, someone who don't know that will start saying that shirk, who's in a dogma perspective, under the mind control. Do you understand? And then they start fighting each other. You know what I mean? And this is how it works. Are we clear? While all the priesthood all know this stuff to be true, they have the foundation for themselves. But they never teach it to the masses. That's how they stay in control. And then they keep you fighting each other in the name of your beliefs. Then they do things to you and then point to someone else, and then they fund both of you secretly with weapons to fight each other. Then they control you all. Are we clear? Now the scholars of the world, like say for instance, if you're talking to, say a Brahmic priest from Sindh, Hindustan, right? To the dumb masses, they call him an Indian. Ain't no such thing as that. Doesn't exist. You understand what I'm saying to you? Now you're talking to them secretly, and they already know that most of the dogma systems that the people got came from the ancient Mauryan dynasty from Sindh that you call India. Now, whether you talking about Zoroaster, that would be an angle from which we get Islam. You see? So it all traces back to the same thing. That's what I'm saying to you. Now, all scholars know that, but the believers are not told that. That's so that they can keep at each other's throats. Are we clear? So most of the confusion that you see on the planet and the wars and stuff, ain't no devil did it. The priesthood did. And they maintain it. And they're the biggest stockholders in the arsenals of the world is the church. Fact. Are we clear? I'm just dropping these things at you because you need to know. So, because, you know, people get sensitive when you go into this information because they think you're attacking them. When you're not going to solve problems until you start looking at what things really are, not what you thought they were. So you need to get over yourself, get rid of your ego, start learning to love instead of hate, and start solving some of the problems for the human family. You know, without a personal agenda. But you need to know what's going on. So, copper is the alchemical metal for the planet Venus. That's also Venus. Are we clear?
Clear.
Silver is the alchemical metal for the moon. That's Cosmo. Are we clear? And gold is the alchemical metal for the sun. And since the moon is closest to the earth as a satellite that pretty much controls the tides, etc., and the cycles of the fish, how they swim, the currents of the ocean, etc., and balances with the sun, your 4 seasons, that's where you get this 4 seasons from, etc. So you got the moon and the ecology on Earth. And so that's what Mooni is. So that's why the gold, the silver, and the copper is the money. Are we clear?
Clear.
And it has been anciently agreed to, and therefore that's why it's used in international trade. Because you need no third party to verify its stable value. All fiat needs at least a third party to accept it. And once the faith is lost, it dies. That's why fiat only creates debt. Are we clear?
Clear.
So now, what Rome did, they came here, because remember the Constantinians came here to steal our gold and silver. That's surface. So they steal the gold and silver and gave you fiat under the popes of Rome, controlled from England, etc. And then you were lied to and trained from childhood that you were getting paid when you were never getting paid. It's debt script. Are we clear? And you've been operating on it for quite a few generations. So the concept that you buy things and the concept that you own things by virtue of the debt script, which is a fiat claim, is dead from the door, and therefore, through their corporate state, the members of the Roman Curia, who are all your politicians and an oligarchy, actually own the property and you, although it's by sanctum claim and by doctrine of discovery. That's what the discovery is. It ain't Columbus discovering America in the sense, it's the doctrine of discovery operating on the American people, which is a church bulla of the Spanish Inquisition. You know, now all scholars know that, but they will never say it to you like I just said it to you, to keep you all spooked up. And as long as you're in that spooky degree, they got you. Are we clear? What we're trying to do is get you to start thinking again so that you can change your mind, because the decolonization must take place here before it can take place on the physical plane. Are we clear? Because fiat and faith, blind faith, are companions. The fiat lives because the blind faith lives. When the blind faith dies, the fiat dies. When the fiat dies, then you start getting to the truth that's already in nature and get back to Cosmology. So the rebellion must be in your mind, because it's a physical battle. It's in the mind, what you would call spiritual first, but it manifests in the physical. So since we're dealing with our economic and political problems, we have to know what economy actually is in order to really have goals in your mind of how you're going to operate. This is another reason why I left this on the board. Now I'm going to erase it. All right? Because it's still related to what we're talking about. Are we clear? All right. You can come up closer and take a picture if you want. And this is from the last time, but you know, I just wanted, rather than just take it off, because it's there, I know it will create some curiosity. So before I erase it, you know, I dropped a little bit about it, because you need to know that that's part of what you're talking about. Now, the same way they distort people's comprehension about this is the same way they distort about who Americans are and who they are not. One of the problems that you have going on is that the world, when I say the world, we're talking about the political jurisdictions of nation states. You have your bond system that are operating, that they do what you call international trade with, and then you have your treasury notes. The major thing that's being under attack right now by the nations of the earth, which we talked about, you know, 5-7 years ago down here, but is coming to manifest. So now you're understanding some of the things we were talking about before. The nations of the earth are dumping all U.S. treasury bonds. So they are printing and doing what you call digital double bookkeeping entries to the tune of about 170 to 180 billion notes a day. And they've been doing it for the most part of this year. So therefore, this is what the trade problems are really have their root in the world, because most of your nation states have their reserves in the U.S. corporate dollar. Therefore, they're actually been robbing the rest of the world by default through these Federal Reserve notes. They've already robbed the people here, so this is why the people here have gentrified communities, because they've already conquered you. They've been doing it to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is not accepting it. Finally. Now, you need to be aware of it, because regardless of where you are in your consciousness, if you're not in harmony, or at least up to snuff with what's really going on in the world, you're going to be left behind. Are we clear? And while you must learn methods of compromise to work these things out as things transit, you need to really know what's really going on in the world and why Donald Trump is doing some of the things he's doing. Like a lot of these trades that you're seeing, these trade agreements that he's doing around the world, The reason why he's doing it, because he's got to make trade agreements because all the old trade platforms are dead. He's got to try to force business back here in the north, because technically it's already collapsed. The only reason why it hasn't absolutely collapsed is because other nation states have been transacting international trade with the dollar. If it wasn't for that, you'd have a depression here already that is 5 times greater than what took place in 1930. So while these people are mad at Donald Trump, they really need to kind of smile at him. And not that he's really want to, but he's got to clean. One of the things that the world is commanding of him is to get the corruption in check that's been here since 1861. And logically, it can't be done in one administration. However, and it doesn't mean that he's doing it because he likes you. He's doing it because he got it. Do you understand? At the same time, they're still arguing over your estate. And you need to know, because the deal of it is, you're asleep, but this is still going on. And don't be thinking that you're going to get this new job while they're talking about the job market and stuff like that, because it's not going to be what you think it is. So you're going to need to learn some things, a lot of things, in order to survive this transition. Now, remember about 5 to 7 years ago when we were reminding you to watch Deutsche Bank in Germany? And the reason why is because the Pope's tributary agency, known as the CIA, and the FBI and the Federal Reserve, they're all partners. Stop thinking that they're separate, because they're not. Forced Germany to accept a lot of their bonds, of their packaged derivatives, mortgages and stuff. And they do a lot of money, what they call money laundering. It's not money, but money laundering through these banking systems, are we clear? And so they carry more on their books of these derivatives and dead mortgage packages and dead loan packages than, say, 2/3 of all the business that takes place in Wall Street, takes place in Deutsche Bank. So Deutsche Bank pretty much operates in Europe as Wall Street operates at North America. Are we clear? And there's a partnership. Are we clear? Give me the mic, because we refer that this.
Cut it on.
You turn it on.
Yesterday, they spoke something that Trump had his money in Deutsche Bank. What was happening? It seemed like that was a spelling. How do you spell that?
Deutsche. I think it's with a D-E-U or D-U. Yeah. Yeah, with a C-H-E, something like that. Yeah.
Said that he had.
No, he had made some loans, but don't get caught up in that.
Okay.
Because, and I'll tell you why. All persons in what you would call, they like to call themselves the elite class, really don't have to make compensation for loans. That's only for the poor class. This is how it works. See, and this is again why you need to know about how things really work. The Roman Curia is the operative, what you would call, subcategory classification of membership of many different other secret orders, but generally is all heads of all corporate heads of all corporations under the jurisdiction of the Western Hemisphere, whether the United States, Germany, Canada, Britain, France, etc., referring to themselves as the Western world. Are we clear? The heads of all of their different corporates are members of the Roman Curia. Are we clear? Like, say what confuses our people, because they really don't understand how this stuff works. Whereas they'll make you work your labor to get a couple of hundred Federal Reserve notes, and you're thinking you're getting paid. They take suitcases of finance with Roman Curia members. You're a Roman Curia member. You will be designated certain part of this area. Your job is to, over a period of time, buy up land, property, businesses, stock, etc., and then at given times gentrify the neighborhood at will. And you don't pay anything for it. They just give it to you. It's a war action. The people think, people think that the Congress people, who are really oligarchs, they're not congressmen for you. They are oligarchs under the secret treaty of Verona, Knights Templars, Kaiklos, Ku Klux Klan, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, all your praetors, presidents of Knights of Malta, and you're under European colonial operations. Are we clear? What you think money is, they like cigars with, because it's just printed like candy wrappers. The issue is for you to believe that it's money. And so long as you're in that, the first mental in our mind is that the value of what we've been trained that it is a value that they have that it is. And I went to the restroom in there, washed my hands, and just like when I do this, I just toss this in the trash. And we got more rolls here. That's how they take the fiat, but they don't do it in front of you. Because they have to train you to think that it has value. It has none. It has bookkeeping value only for them. But they play to you that it has value. What I showed you is the gold and silver is the money. They're training for the masses, just like their belief systems, is that the fiat is the money. No different than, right? Some of the things that we were talking about years ago, as we're evolving now, where people have mortgages and think they own property, they have deeds. This is why every once in a while we remind you of allodial titles and aboriginal titles, which are the titles here in North America. And the reason why your imams, rabbis, bishops, and everything won't tell the people that, because they work with the state. They got a skull and bones agreement. They're really overseers. Are we clear? But they themselves know. That's why you see all your religious so-called leaders are always wealthy. Nice, beautiful palace houses and 5 cars and everything, while the people is always praying and marching all over the place. And they're leading them down that road. Well, I guarantee you all of them got trusts. Are we clear? This whole idea that people keep having, that these people, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. Get in the mic.
Yeah. I found out if you use this at the gas pump,
Yeah,
that's what you said earlier, they charge you.
sure.
But if you use cash,
Yeah.
how can they charge you? How can they make money off you?
But see, they're not, now the language. Either way, the charge, the money, the whole game, that's language connotative that they're presenting to you, but that's not really what it works. It's all about control.
Right.
Controlling you and controlling the resources.
Right.
Are we clear? Now the real deal is gas, or the oil that comes on Earth, is actually a lubricant created by the Earth, renewable for lubrication purposes. It's actually a bacteria. And it ain't come from no dinosaur's fat. The Earth produces it. Oh, yeah. And the resources belong to the people. See, but the deal of it is, it doesn't belong to them in the first place. But the deal of it is to control you. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Now, again, mortgage, which you already know, means dead pledge. So dead, Latin, dead. That's why they say mortuary, mortician, morgue, dead contract, dead agreement. So they give you a dead pledge, and they pledge your body, and you be thinking that you're buying a home, and you actually you got a sharecropping agreement for your labor as a tenant. That's why all mortgages list people as tenants. Oh yeah. At North America, you understand? And that's since 1913. See, so we're not talking ancient. Are we clear?
Yeah.
So in the dead status or under the black codes, that's like an automatic. Are we clear? That's like an automatic. And this is another reason why it's important for people to know the history, so that you willingly on your own will nationalize and get out of that status, so that you can start reclaiming your estate. But they're not going to do it. You must do it. Now, and this is back to the Special Committee of 24. A lot of these things they suppose have been teaching you since 1960. Are we clear? But logically, they haven't. And what has been happening, the UK, what they like to call themselves the royal family, and the U.S. corporation, which is this military arm, has been doing wars all around the world to keep the people destabilized, when actually they were supposed to be decolonizing. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Are we clear? And so, again, a lot of the mental decolonization is really what we do while we're here. You know, the more, and people need to understand that the Moorish Divine National Movement is a decolonization activity. And I know that most people aren't told that, and therefore not aware of that, but you need to be aware of that. That is a decolonization activity. As well as a status restoration activity, as well as a historical platform of correction of chronology. You know, so it's multiple level civilizing principles. You know, and I know that you recognize, anybody that's been around for a minute, that very often people have this information and don't tell the people that. They tell them it's a religious belief club. You know what I mean? A religion club, which of course is not. You know, that's because of infiltration and compromission. Again, by a lot of times to really be honest with people and share some of the vital information. You have to come to a venue like this, because venues where it should have been told have been neutralized. You know, but if you get the people to a certain degree of comprehension, they'll take off on their own. You know, because once you get the concept, it's not something that somebody needs to tell you. It's your common sense would start putting this puzzle together. You know, the difficulty that you'll find is that when you start exercising it, logically you're going to get resistance because of the unum sanctum operations and the doctrine of discovery. And this is where you must come together, organized, without ego, but understanding constitutional enforcement. That's why that is a major aspect of the Moorish Divine National Movement, constitutional enforcement, because you need that unity platform, and as well as enforcing the fundamental operations of law and process that already exist before you were born, that you were just not made aware of. And then, of course, we're exercising ourselves, getting back to it. And as you were talking earlier, Barack H. Obama exposed a little bit, but he didn't go into greatest detail. But so the average person here, under the operations of the Skull and Bones and the Columbus operations of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick P. Gates under the General Education Board, not only think that the United States is a country, you know, they don't even know anything about the real politics. And so it's incumbent upon those who know to really tell the truth, even though, you know, you always have that feedback, if you get the point. So this is, again, as a reminder to you, why the German Dutchman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, while they relinquished under the rules of decolonization, jurisdiction at Morocco, instead of releasing jurisdiction at Morocco, what they did is acknowledge part of the province in South Asia that you call Africa of Morocco in 1956. When the headquarters or the heartland is right here in North America. And so they breached. And when you study the history, you'll kind of understand the motu proprio that Pope Francis did in 2013, and then the civil orders that he did directly to Barack Obama 2014. Then you'll understand when Barack Obama went to Hikuta, which you call Egypt, and he exposed that the American Constitution comes from fatwa. It's Muslim law. You know, so people here think that the Constitution for the United States came from John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Madison, and them. No, it didn't. It came from your forefathers. That's Muslim law. You know, so our people disconnect from things that they think is not theirs. And in doing so, they're actually abandoning their right of claim. You know, so these things need to be comprehended and understood for you to recognize your obligation and responsibility, being the people of the land, to enforce that Constitution. It's not just a historical fact. It's not just a cultural fact. It is vital to your economic and social well-being. You know, and you know, and I know that most of our people aren't connected to that Constitution mentally from that perspective, because they think that came from the Europeans. It didn't come from the Europeans, it came from Muslims. You know, even the fact that Matuaka was Muslim, and they'll teach the little children that Matuaka was a tree hugger, and her name was Pocahontas. You know, fiction again. She was Muslim. She's daughter of Wahansunuko, Muslim chieftain of the Powhatan Confederation. And that's in your Southern Gate. And honestly, Confederation of Law of the Great Peace, Gisnawa, is from which the Constitution for the United States was adopted. And that's in your northern territories of the North Gate. And this is not India, and we're not Indians. You know, but again, you know, once they can get you into these little pockets of misinformation and you accept them, you lose. See, so the people here who don't know the real history think that Islam started with Prophet Muhammad in Saudi Arabia. Islam been here for over 20,000 years. But not the way you thought it was. You know, so the real history has to be exposed. And this is again why the Europeans are really kind of nervous, because many of you are starting to finally break through and figure this stuff out. Because once your mind changes, your power energy changes, because it's actually atmospheric. You know, because people don't know that they have power. So they think the power is outside of themselves, and it's actually they're transceivers. You know, so a lot of these different subject matters we get on is really to inspire you to activate your DNA, because it's already in you, really, actually. It's just that much of the misconceptions that we have, that we've grown up with, we have to shed them. You know, we have to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but then we need to know what Caesar's is and what ain't. And all of this stuff here don't belong to Caesar. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? What they've been doing is robbing you with fiat. So this is what they do. Like, for instance, Detroit, example. Let's talk about some facts. The British sued the United States Corporation and the Bar Association because they're continuing the unum sanctum operations of war against the Americans, which is you. They want to drain and kill the economy. So what they were doing is systematically moving all industry off the land into other jurisdictions and enslaving other nation states. Are we clear? Are we clear? With the intent of draining the carcass and then dropping the carcass. Are we clear? Trump is starting to reverse that, because he's a Knights of Columbus. He's a Knights Templar. He already knows what's up. And so understand that Trump is assigned That, we must understand that too. He's assigned. Now, they're dumping all the T-bonds, and the T-bonds they set up after the commercial mercenary war in the early 60s. This is what you're trained to call it the Civil War, which is a false cover. It's commercial mercenary war, continuation of the Spanish Inquisition against you. All right, so that's the way they blind you, making you think that Americans are fighting Americans. No, they're foreign Europeans fighting Americans. Are we clear?
Clear.
Are we clear? Go ahead, brother. Get that brother Mike. Go ahead.
Islam Noble. I got a question related to the decolonization that we're learning about. Prophet said that we needed to have a treasury.
Yeah.
Besides having certain seeds, organic seeds, other things like, what's that going to look like? Do you understand?
Now, this is the deal: is to get you, and that you is always us plural, into the training and habit of dealing with economic trade. It's not that what it is and what it isn't was not known. Plus, when you see, when Jwali was on the scene, the Republic was still honored, although it was still being in the process of being overthrown. And they had put the seal, I think in 28, back on the note. That's where you see the Great Seal, put back on the note. Prior to that, it'd been off the notes since around 1788, something like that, around that time. And you'll see some of the older notes at George Washington Masonic Lodge. They'll display some of the old notes in there with the Great Seal on it. And then they removed it, and I think they started putting them back in the encyclopedias and back on the note in around 28. However, the notes were certificates, which are technically checks, that you could still redeem the gold and silver with. Are we clear? And so once you understand the politics, you can see that what they've been doing is slow walking the people so that the people would not get alarmed and rebel. But that's what they've been doing, but the policy has not changed. The fact that, the problem that you have is that people keep thinking that certain things ended. The policies have not changed, the war, Spanish Inquisition has not changed, they changed the names. It's also called the Negro Act, it's also called Trading with the Enemy Act, it's also called Christian Black Code 1724. It's still the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors, who are the Americans, who think that human beings are crayons. You know, so this is where you have, and so you've got to clear this up with the heirs to get them to even be capable of reversing some of this stuff. You can't reverse the workings of the dark priesthood, the dark magics, with you living a lie. Because nature doesn't recognize our belief systems. That's stuff that we made up. But we keep applying it to nature. We keep saying Allah did this. Most of the stuff we did. Get over it. You know, and if you're not willing to start being honest with yourself, nature's not going to sit around and play games with you. They'll let Romans extinguish you, because that's what Rome's intent is. You know, the genocide program is on, whether we like it or not, and your idol gods ain't been saving you. So stop pretending and stop saying things like that to your children when you know daggone well the real deal with these people is that they punked out. And they keep trying to hide behind religion and trying to feel safe when they're not safe, and they need to stop playing. You know what I mean? They need to activate that DNA. For real. They said they were gods, right? Right? Now it's time to prove it. You know, you say you're carpenter, you fix the door? Well, we hired you last week. I still feel air.
You're still broke.
You know, we need to get over ourselves. So, now the reality is, all of this stuff is in your face. And the deal of it is to give you or share with you certain information, trusting that you will have the courage and integrity as a being and respect for life as a being enough to start exercising your mental and using this information honorably. Because if you don't, doesn't matter, because he wins. As long as you're dishonest, he wins. Observe him, don't get absorbed by him, are we clear?
Clear.
They're also your lesson. As we're talking, they're your lesson. You know, so they're not, you know, it's like the Bible say they're the shadow of your lower self. You know, and as you learn and comprehend these things, that shadow will leave. And the same energy that you see in the Aquarian lights, etc., will not accept the platforms that were constructed in the Piscean age. It's not going to happen. So you're dealing with forces of nature, and you really need to understand them. And you don't need to believe any of it. You need to start studying nature and seeing what's really going on. Because nothing's hidden from you. We're only blinded because of belief systems, are we clear? Not that divine order. Allah's made everything available to us. We've blinded ourselves with belief systems that we've adopted from Rome and corrupted ourselves. And we need to accept that that's what we've done. You know, and stop being punks and start being real and start fixing stuff. But you can't fix stuff with beliefs, you gotta fix stuff with knowledge. You know what I mean? So anyway, so in the treasury bonds, difference from the bond system, because they trade them back and forth, that's to keep the people busy. That's not a real reflection of the real economics, are we clear? That's a reflection of what you call the padded artificial debt, compounded, are we clear? And in the process, stealing the resources with the trade of the fiat, are we clear? So this is why you see, like when they drop them buildings in New York and accuse Muslims of doing it with a box knife in the cave in Afghanistan and all that kind of stuff. That's called diversion, and that's again where they do the identity theft. They do stuff and say somebody else did it, and then do something to somebody else, and then get them fighting each other, and then they'll sell weapons to them, and they'll stand back like they're peacemakers, and they started the whole thing, and then rob everybody. And you notice that they always saying God and country type statements. So people's concept of what God is and what God is not got to be corrected too. That's another subject matter, but it ain't what you think it is either. On the surface, you can just say, in truth, it's government ordnance departments. That's what it is, because that's what it is. And so our people be looking at divine stuff, the European looking at it as a war tool, because it absolutely is a war tool. Him claiming jurisdiction over you and your estate. And so that convolution is the contortions. A lot of things that we're doing in these last, 10, 15 years, judicial proclamations, etc., is really a countermeasure. It's not limited to that. That's to get you in the exercise of mind, are we clear? Also, what it does, it neutralizes the bonding system that they have in place. All communications with you in trade are done in bond systems. You're looking at what you call the Federal Reserve notes, you're calling them dollars. When it gets past you into the banking system, like all the different taxes they put on you, all of them go into one pot. They're just telling you all these different taxes so you won't pay attention to the fact that they're robbing you of 50 to 70% of all of your labor through them Federal Reserve notes. When actually, you're not supposed to be taxed at all. Are we clear? Constitutionally, you're not to be taxed at all. Now, and so again, that knowledge of that is part of your decolonization. Your decolonization. Are we clear? Once you get this grounded, you're supposed to teach your family members, not try to convince them on belief. You must teach them, but in order to teach them, you need to know what you're talking about. So when you're looking at the Constitution that says Indians not taxed, it means indigenous people are not taxed. That's why it's important for them to bring you Negro, black, and colored, and Indian and get you to agree to it, and therefore you become a U.S. citizen, which is really stock, and that's the basis upon which they've been taxing you. And then they converted your allodial and aboriginal titles to mortgages and deeds, and that's how they've been taxing you out of your homes. And the term that they use is hypothecation. So write that down so you get used to it. This is none of this stuff is new. We've talked about this here and there, but what I'm recognizing a lot of the work that's being done around the country with people dealing with writ systems and stuff like that, trying to restore their jurisdictional claim over their estates, the questions that come up indicate that they're not clear. But once you understand what the function is in the canvas of the background, you would say, you recognize it yourself. Are we clear? And I trust that what we're trying to do is to get the people to understand and comprehend that while we're discussing some of these things, we're not giving you an idea, we're telling you what's up. A lot of times people, because not so many people talk about this stuff, that this is some kind of concept that we have. It's not a concept. We're telling you exactly how things operate. You just need to be aware of it. You comprehend? Meaning, as an example, a lot of people who aren't conscious of the bloodline and the pedigree think that this information doesn't involve them because they claim to be Christians, or they go to a church, or they're in some other organization, or they're a member of the Nation of Islam, or Gods on Earth, and think it does. All of this has everything to do with them, just like it does with you. And the same information that we're telling you right now, their leaders were supposed to be telling them too. In all the mosques, the church, the synagogues too. And that's what you'll read in the international law with the rights of indigenous people, that this information was to be dispensed amongst these people at all costs. And you already know right now, 90% of these people keep thinking that this is Moorish information. With some conscious Moors, half of them divided against each other too. Got different opinions. And what I'm telling you is actually fact. And these politicians know it. And your leaders have been told this information. Now, for those of you, give you some more reference point. How many of you remember when the Pope Francis did the motu proprio in 2013, and they called religious leaders from all of the religious orders from around the world? They met with the Pope and they promised to end the doctrine of discovery. How many of you are aware of that? Look around the room. So you remember that, right? Look around the room, y'all. Now, the deal of it is, what I'm telling you right now is what they're supposed to have been doing. Are we clear? And again, for those who already have a background, this is why the Pope did the letter directly to Barack H. Obama. Now, to understand these politics, so the rest of the world recognizing that they've been breaching and breaching and breaching, are dumping the U.S. Treasury bonds. That is the economic problem that's taking place on the planet right now. Are we clear? You need to be up on it because it's about your estate. Are we clear? So you need, when I say you, we're talking about you and your family members need to get sophisticated, a little bit more sophisticated quickly. You really do. Meaning that we, unfortunately, don't have the option of this ignorance continuing, of people not understanding what we're talking about. And we've got to find methods of getting this point across to them that they must become active. And the other deal of it is that they plan to kill you anyway before you find out. That's why they're doing the GMO stuff. That's why they've been sacrificing the babies, disappearing these children, roughly around 240 to 150,000 children. They've been not only using it in their rituals, but removing the heirs. It's not only just for the food supply, not only for that adrenochrome that they've been doing, you know, torturing the children and bleeding them. You know, yeah. So people keep looking at that. They keep talking about pedophilia, but they're not talking about they're actually sacrificing those children and also sending the carcasses to food joints, and it's actually mixed in the hamburgers so that they can charge you with cannibalism of your own children, which is also why a lot of these people getting sick.
Mad cow disease.
They don't know that they're eating their children. You know, that's why they can sell the burgers so cheap.
Make them accountable, so it become more private.
Oh, yeah. So anywhere where they're selling hamburgers, anywhere, that's why in some of the countries, and even some of the Europeans, they will not accept hamburgers from United States Corporation, because they know it's babies in them. That's true. You know, so the decolonization, you know, you've got to do it, and it starts here. But you can't operate on emotion. You got to really kind of know what's going on. You can't operate with hate. You got to operate with knowledge. You understand what I'm saying to you? Because nature herself will rewire you if you're sincere. And then you'll just draw the knowledge right out of the atmosphere. That's another thing they don't want you to know about yourself. Because these beings are transceivers. It's another reason why dogmata is used as a war tool. What you've been calling belief systems, what you've been calling religion, is a war tool. Hard lesson? True. That's why you hear me every once in a while remind people that the masses don't get religion. They get dogmata. That's not to insult them. It's not to knock them. Every secret society on the planet has what is known as an adept chamber. All your organizations have adept chambers. On the political and your esoteric realm. On the political realm is where diplomats are received from other nation states and other jurisdictions. That's a reception point. And on the esoteric plane is where the real truth of human history and human organization and governmental principles are taught to the rulers and kept from the masses. It's called adept. Adept means expert. And so when you see people go into Knights Templar, Knights of Columbus, Kaiklos, Ku Klux Klan, Union Guard, White Camellia, Daughters of American Revolution, Daughters of ISIS, Masonry Shriners, etc., Knights of Malta, all of these are what you call Privy Council orders. Privy Council orders. We're clear. And all of them are adepts. And to liberate humanity, you've got to know about this in order to stop trusting these people who've been your leaders. And know why they haven't been telling you that is because they've been part of the game of keeping you in the corral. Yeah. And getting a piece of the spoils, even though Rome has been taking the majority. He gives them a little piece of the action to keep the BS going. That's their 501c3 agreement. That's set up by Lyndon Baines Johnson to control what they call their black preacher civil rights marching overseers. You got a 501c3 agreement. And this is where they agree to teach the dogmatic forms of religion and not go into the Kabbalistic science of the books. And then keep the people marching around the place and praying while they get preyed upon while in secret they got 32 and 33 degrees of knowledge with a Moorish fez, and they go to a lodge with a Moorish name, and they got their fezzes and secrets with Allah on it, and the jewels and all these Muslim names, which you'll see right there in the Masonic Lodge, George Washington's Masonic Lodge too. It's not a secret. The point that I'm doing, I'm just telling you, because a lot of people keep thinking that their leader guys don't know this information, because they're in the mosque or the church or the synagogue. All of them are Gnostics. Gnostic's not negative. It means those who bear the knowledge. You know, and like when the prophet said, and you hear the phrase the prophet said, the day will come when people will come into this movement with their eyes already open and will carry out my law. What is he saying? He's telling you that many of them that was at that point weren't really carried, they were just clubbing. And he said, I want active Moors, not passive Moors. And this is again why certain literature from the prophet is never read by some of these people, where he's telling you about the infiltration, literally. You know, that's just a point of information. And then again, you know, like a lot of people are aware of Adab chamber, then don't know what an Adab is. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? You know how like people can be involved in organizations, they hear certain things, and then if you ask them, they may have an opinion on it, but 9 times out of 10 they're incorrect. They're just making up stuff or assuming things they don't know. Because if they knew, they would walk it. You understand? As an example, in the Nation of Islam, one of the things where I think it was Article 6 in the actual facts, where Elijah would say, what is a Mason? And the answer would be a Mason is a Muslim son. That's an added lesson. Now, then you may have heard the phrase coming from the Lamb in the area of as people had studied the actual facts, etc., and the problem book. They say the supreme wisdom will be handed to you later. He's telling them again that they don't have it all. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And you'll find most of your leaders, you know, while they, and I'm not knocking them, I'm just telling you the truth how things operate. While they'll have their followers on a belief degree, secretly 90% of them being raised as Masons in the club lodge. Although that's their birthright, truthfully. I mean, you ain't gotta belong to a club to be a Mason. You came from a mother's womb, you're a Mason. You're a mother's son. But you need to know that culturally, not from that club perspective. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? But anyway, so with the, back to the Special Committee of 24, the Special Committee of 24 nation states, they were to initiate the decolonization, in which they named them. So I want you all to go look up Special Committee of 24, and you'll find the outline of the prerequisite operations of decolonization. And of course, thank you so much. That's supposed to take place here. And so we're depending on you to start doing that within yourselves. And of course, like the baby, see, he has an advantage because he's born with you being conscious. So a lot of things that otherwise he would automatically be steeped into them Christian black codes, you're not gonna let that happen. But that same thing should have been happening generations ago with all of these people. But since it was not done, it's incumbent upon you to do a lot that was not done. Are we clear? Now, I'll point again, as we told you what the money is, and it doesn't mean that therefore you have it and therefore you have the money. The real deal is for you to get reclaimed operations, jurisdictional powers over your resources. Are we clear? Essentially, with all of you, you've got to stop calling Europeans white man. And you gotta stop calling them Americans. Call them who they are, the same way that you're now claiming your birthright, and you don't do it with hostility. You do it because it's the truth. However, not to do it is to relinquish your claim to the birthright. Are we clear? When you were talking earlier, you know, and I said we were going to share some of this, and people ask for the where are the 7 centers that we send out the proclamation to, and it's because this is the deal. Now, as I said to you before, and I'm saying to you now, all CEOs of all the corporate heads of all corporations are members of the Roman Curia. Now, you already know that as this information spreads around the world and around the country, that everybody's not aware of that because they don't have, you know, the nuance of communication with people who have this information over a period of time. And so they go on common sense and what they think they know. This is why a lot of people are distracted by, you know, financial statement processes, UCC processes, a whole bunch of different processes. Not that those things aren't involved, because they are in many aspects, but as a fundamental root, that is not the platform for your reclamation of a state. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you need to come to that realization yourself, because a lot of questions by default will arise as you start communicating. Because as soon as you start communicating, Rome knows where you're going to go. This is why a lot, like you were saying earlier, you know, when you ask for the bond number and they don't tell you, well, yet they're interfacing with you, and then you're continuing to interface with them. You should never let them get past that. You know, when you do, that means you consented. You see the point? And you're seeking remedy in a venue that was set there to steal the birthright. That's the convolution. And until one comprehends that these are human trafficking trading venues, you're not offended by it, though you can be. You're only offended if you didn't know that that's what it was and you find out what it was. Now you're offended, but you shouldn't have been surprised. You know, just like our people keep on acting surprised at different things that the European does. He's a colonist. How many generations it takes these people to recognize that he's a colonist? He does what a colonist does. He's a vampire. He's a leech. He's a parasite. His politics are based in parasiticism. He's not mad at you. He's a parasite. You jump in dirty water, leech. You know, don't say, "Oh man, I'm mad and I'm going to go suck his blood." They go, "Nice sandwich there." You know, they doing their thing, and it ain't freckles. You know what I mean? It's bleach. We collectively keep acting surprised at the untoward things that the Europeans do, because they can be so cruel, so heartless, so contrary to that which is morally or ethically correct. And we keep thinking he's mad. He's not mad. They're carrying out unum sanctum operations. It's conquest. They're not telling you the truth because they know they're colonists. They don't want you to say that they're colonists. So they say they're Americans to steal your estate. You being ignorant, don't counter it. At that point, from a legal perspective, you've acquiesced. And you're talking something else and don't even know what just took place. You just set a foundation of jurisdiction. So the issue of jurisdiction must be very clear with you. The jurisdiction of self, you know, in personam jurisdiction would, as the prophet said, be yourself. Stop trying to be somebody else. That's inappropriate persona. You know, but these things must be already known. They must be the canvas of your thinking. Then subject matter jurisdiction in all matters of trade, etc. Because most things that take place between humans on the planet is trade. Trade and taxation. So if you don't understand jurisdictions, limits of jurisdictions, etc., you're already confused when you start doing business. As soon as you step out of the world, out of your house, you're doing business. In the operations of communications, you're doing business standing still. At North America, under European colonial operations, you're not allowed to be poor. You're designated to be poor, but you're not allowed to be poor, meaning that you sit, do nothing, they'll still tax you for existing. Do you understand? So you need to get clear on this stuff to turn this stuff around. Are we clear?
Clear.
And it's called decolonization. And it's not an issue of anger, it's an issue of right law operations. Are we clear? Or what is called constitutional enforcement. The convolution and the contortions that have been set in place with connotative linguistics, the lack of due process. The lack of due process is because, like, even when, Beyond, when you was talking earlier, was removal. Right? Now why? Give him a mic. Why?
Removal to a different venue?
Huh?
The removal to a different venue?
Of course. So if it's in an improper venue, and you keep trying to seek remedy in it and arguing with them, it's jurisdiction. In other words, like this, we're playing tennis, right? Knocking in your court. You knock it in the net over here, right? You knock it over here, right? It's a football. So if it's not a tennis ball, it's not that it's not a ball, right? It's in the wrong venue, right? Constitutions are structured to take care of that, aren't they? So you deal with judicial branch of government, correct? Right? So read judicial branch of government, Constitution. The judicial powers. And pay attention to this, you all, because I'm going to show you, because this is, the contortion is us doing things in venues that are improper and expecting a different result, or a result that is not to be had in a venue. Are we clear? Meaning that, say, many of you went around here earlier and got some vegan food, right? Which I did, right? But you're not gonna go in there and ask them for a Wendy burger. And you're not gonna get, what you mean you ain't got a Wendy burger? You wouldn't get upset. It's a vegan restaurant. You understand what I'm saying to you? Right. You don't go to Chuck E. Cheese's with the children and ask them for a Miller's Light. I mean, you wouldn't expect it, because it's the wrong venue, and you wouldn't be offended, would you? All right, read Article 3, Section 1 and 2.
Oh, I thought you meant the definition of judicial
I want
power.
you to read Article Judicial Powers, United States.
Okay. Article 3, Section 2, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and in equity arising under this Constitution, the laws
Read
of the
very clearly.
United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consul, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of a different state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign state citizens or subjects. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, Section 2. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consul, and those in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as a law and fact, which such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall take. The trial of
Now-
all
All right. Now, let's cut through because we got about 10 minutes. Now, the point that I'm saying to you is this. Now, you notice that that is an international venue. How many people don't recognize that that's an international venue? People of different states and people of foreign states, what does that tell you? Diversity. Now you understand why Eisenhower shut that down? And then they promoted the 14th Amendment marching guys for people of the land to agree to be Negro, U.S. citizens, thinking that they were going to get a benefit, when actually they were coming under the black codes, when that's the venue of diversity. But to acknowledge that Constitution is to acknowledge the pedigree and the nationality of the people. Go ahead.
So, Taj, I was going to ask you, so you mentioned in 1956, Eisenhower, the Eisenhower administration established jurisdiction in the Kingdom of Morocco.
No,
Around the
what they
same time-
did, they relinquished jurisdiction in the North Territories and then established the fiction of Morocco, Kingdom of Morocco, as if it is singular, as distinguished from a subordinate province of the Moroccan Empire, which is North America.
Now, wasn't that around the same time that they did away with the consular court system?
That was
here?
54. See, 54, 55, 56, midpoint 55, that's when they start pushing them Negro 53, 52, 32 and 33 degree Masons and march these people around under the civil rights God. Seemed good, didn't it? Appeared like they was helping people, didn't they? No, what they was doing is getting rid of all the hotels that our people owned, all the businesses that they owned, etc., putting them under the black codes, making them state property under the guise of Jesus marchers, while they themselves were 32 and 33 degree Masons. Got a Moorish fez, been taken to the mountaintop, that's your great seal. In Masonry, Muhammad's mountain is that great seal. That's no secret. But these people thought these people were all Jesus guys, didn't they? Well, they were sold out. Get over it. And then as soon as they're no longer useful, they neutralize them, get rid of them. Now the point of it is, Eisenhower, because remember, consular court deals with treaty enforcement. See, people keep talking about this Constitution, it's treaty enforcement. And the treaty is part of the Constitution. And you understand why Barack Obama said what he said. But he's signaling, hoping these people, is somebody teaching these people? They're sending out the signals all they can. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? But, you know, if the people aren't reading or aren't studying, aren't acting on it, you can't make them come to honor if they want to keep on playing like they church. Constantine, and then lying and saying it's Jesus. Remember, the world knows that they're lying even if they don't know that they're lying. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? These people claim to be Christians are Constantinians. which is why Reverend Pigfoot will never tell the people in the church the official name of Christianity is the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. They've been worshiping Constantine in the name of Jesus, really serving Rome, suffering, losing, going into poverty, and then going to court as blacks, as Christian property, getting screwed, and then marching all over the place, praying for salvation that they're not going to damn get. So we need to tell the truth and start fixing this thing. So back to point, right? The issue of the foreclosure is an argument of estate. They will argue it as a debtor's court issue. Whether the debtor's court issue is the issue of the dead pledge, of the unpayable alleged debt, or, and inclusive with it, the tithing operations of the corporation called city and state tax, or property tax, all of which is based on a hypothecated claim of estate. Therefore, your approach would be an issue of estate. Right? So now what you're looking at is due process. Right? So now, if they're arguing that they're dealing with admiralty law, well, admiralty jurisdiction still comes under that Constitution. Now, so what happens if you don't enforce it? You waive your right to treaty operations, haven't you? Is that true? Because Constitution and treaties won. So if you're not going to bring that up, and then if you go get a member of the bar and even start communicating with them to do anything in that business, you've already transferred your estate to them. So now they got you, you're arguing certain truths that's kind of tying them up, and so it's stretching it out because they got to move this estate, because they're making a charge on your estate. Implying that it's you, but it's really against the estate. But the estate is an estate that they created. You know, that's Sectoral capital, or capital non-de-guerre, right? So if you're not making a next relational argument on your estate, that they're assuming that you've assumed that the debt exists, and therefore are held liable. And what they're doing, this is what I'm saying that they're doing. The appearance of you wanting to make an argument and trying to play safe at the same time to get a benefit at the same time, and they ain't gonna let you have it. But you've exposed enough information to mess the system up, which is why they've been dancing with you for a while. What I'm suggesting to you is to put a lien against them, every single individual person involved in it, in the multiple levels of thousands, far beyond, because it's a state, including the time that you've even been dealing with it. Because they already know you're not going to get remedy there, because it's hypothecated. Their bonds are floating on it. All of their bonds are floating on it. That mortgage is bundled in what they call derivatives. It is processed through service companies that have them in bundles, and they've built stocks on them, and then they've fractionalized them. And so they'll never give you the allonge on it. So write that down, allonge. A-L-L-A-N-G. E, allonge. And those are attached to all of those instrumentalities.
Sure, I think we stretch all
Yeah, it's what it is.
So, in other words, we have to just attack all the lenders, anybody that's involved that.
Because they ain't let you shit.
Okay.
Everything's off your estate.
But you attack them, you attack
Yes.
them.
In other words, you don't, you wanna get away from, the clerk said, or the lady at the desk says, you wanna know who they are, the same way they got your name on a piece of paper, your attribute on a piece of paper, know everything about you. Anybody that you're dealing with, that's across the board, from that person who's acting as a judge, right on down to the person who's prosecuting, right on down to the persons who say they are the mortgage company, get names, do the traces, do the work, get the bond number, get the carrier number, and put monster liens on them. That's where you need to put your energy to learn. Anyway, we're kind of like over time.
Hey, look, hey, give it up for Big Brother
Thank you,
Taj.
Todd.
All right? And look here, we're gonna be with us on the 14th. Can we go over liens on the 14th?
Yes, we can go.
January?
Huh?
January.
Yeah.
14th, okay.
Okay.
14 January.
14
He gonna go over some liens. Hey, look at I want to introduce a brother and his wife. They've been away from us for a long time. We've been students of Taj though, and he did a lot for this community. They come in from in there, Lamar and Sakita. And this is our extended family right here, and they've been through hell. Y'all heard them all on the news and everything of him getting a big mansion and all this stuff, right? It's him. He out now. You know what I'm saying? And he's gonna go on the 28th, he's gonna go over how to do habeas corpus. Okay? Because any one of us can be locked up at any given time.
Absolutely.
But I tell you what though, man, if y'all can, they just getting home not too long ago. But if y'all can give any donation, please do, because it's needed right now.
Okay.
All right, whatever you can give, you put it in here, and want to help this family out. All right, but he's going to go over habeas corpus, and that's going to be a good class. So man, we see y'all in January,
Okay.
and it's not no New Year.
No, it's not.
All right.
Islam, relatives. Real quick, I'm Lamont Resell. And you know, in being active, you know, Brother Taj always told me to have a habeas corpus on deck, like always ready. That should be standard and a part of protocol, because they will set up countermeasures to have you kidnapped, you know, and also everybody, you and everybody around you should be competent on knowing how to do habeas corpus. Because that needs to be the first line of defense, so that in an event that you or anybody around you gets kidnapped, you already know that you can get them out within 72 hours. All right, so we'll go over that. But Islam.
Islam, man. Y'all just straighten up the chairs and the
Okay.
tables,
We'll do that.
so we can get out of here.
Alrighty. Bring the baby.